And I want to say thanks to MHFA, Mental Health Foundation Australia, for making this possible. I know that COVID-19 has presented a number of challenges for us all, but to enable us to connect virtually and to connect across Australia actually is a great thing in this very unusual time. I know a lot of people logging on are from various fields of work. Some people might be caring for somebody that has a mental health condition. They might be suffering from a mental health condition themselves, or might be somebody that work and support somebody with a mental health issue. So as Jim said, at the moment people are experiencing significant stress, both from a mental health perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And people are looking to get themselves out of that financial stress and to become financially self-sufficient again. And so what we are going to see are people accessing their own super early, and this is under these new COVID-19 pandemic provisions that have been enacted. And I just want to give some information, some general information to people about those provisions, and also about some of the things to consider before making those decisions. I will lead into a discussion about disability insurance benefits, and that's really the bread and butter of what I do. So I'm really passionate about this area of law because I've witnessed the devastating impact that unexpected illness and then unexpected absence from employment and an inability to return to work has had on my clients. And that stress tends to lead to financial stress, and then it becomes a cycle that's really hard to break. So being able to give awareness to people about entitlements that they otherwise didn't know about, or if they knew about them but didn't know how to navigate that process, is a really empowering thing. And I've seen great benefits from doing that for a lot of my clients. So less about me and a little bit more about the work that we do and sort of what motivates me to do that. I'll talk a bit about Maurice Blackburn himself. So this is the good man himself who started the firm that we work at in 1919. So we've been doing this work for just over 100 years now. And his motto was that I believe the law should serve everyone, not just those who can afford it. And that's really the cornerstone of everything that we do. And the value that we live by is access to justice. So it shouldn't be only accessible by people who have the funds to actually back themselves in making a claim or pursuing a matter to court. And that's the basis upon which we work and we offer to pursue claims on a no-win, no-fee basis to our clients. Like Mental Health Foundation Australia, Maurice Blackburn seeks to educate the community, and our role is in creating awareness about the entitlements people have but are often unaware of or too overwhelmed to pursue. And like I said, mental health issues and financial stress are cyclical, and the poor mental health that people suffer from can lead to loss of work and stable income. And COVID-19 has only served to exacerbate these existing problems within our society. And, you know, we sort of feel worried about what we're going to face in the aftermath of this. Even after restrictions are lifted, the economic impact that, you know, loss of jobs and shutdown of businesses will have will no doubt have an impact on mental health as well. In terms of superannuation and insurance, Maurice Blackburn have been doing this type of work and leading this area for over 25 years now. So we've been pursuing insurers and super funds on behalf of our clients and holding them to account for over 25 years. In some cases, claims just do not get approved and they end up at litigation, and that's where the files come to me, but for the large part, we do get a lot of files over the line. We get a lot of cases approved, and that's really great for our clients because then they can move on, retire debt, pay bills, get access to rehab and other treatment that they need. We offer a breadth of services, and I won't talk about those in depth, but I do want to touch on a couple that might overlap with some of the issues that people with mental health concerns might also need some help with, including institutional abuse. A lot of people with mental health issues might have suffered from institutional abuse, might have settled cases in the past, and there might be an opportunity for them to reopen those. And we've seen a lot of media interest in regards to what's happened with institutional abuse cases in recent times. We also do a number of we offer a number of compensation options for people that are injured at work, on the road, in medical negligence scenarios as well. I want to get to the topics that we'll cover today, and firstly talk about access to super under these new pandemic provisions. I'll step through who is eligible to access super under these pandemic provisions, and I'll step also through some of the key considerations that a person should take into account before accessing their super early. One of the most important takeaways from today are the consequences or the other considerations before accessing super, including the risk of losing disability insurance. And I'll step through briefly what disability insurance actually looks like in the context of total and permanent disability and income protection benefits. I do want to note that this is a very general presentation. It's not designed to substitute proper tailored legal advice that's suited to a person's individual circumstances, and it's also not financial advice. So what I would say is, before making any decisions about accessing super, it's really important that you get independent financial advice, and you can make an informed decision after you get that. So very briefly, what is superannuation? So super's been compulsory since 1992, and so almost everyone in the workforce has had super at some stage in their lives. Employers currently pay a minimum of 9.5% of salary into a super fund. That's a super fund that individual will either nominate when they commence employment, or if an employee does not nominate a super fund, the employer will put them into a default fund, and that default fund should be, well, will be My Super compliant, and I'll explain about what that is a bit later. So superannuation is important because not only is it a nest egg for retirement, but it will also likely provide automatic insurance benefits to cover people if they become sick and unable to work. And usually, it doesn't matter how you became sick or how long you're off work. It doesn't have to necessarily be related to the negligence of anybody. It could be a naturally occurring medical condition. It could be stress that's totally unrelated to work. So this Venn diagram looks at the early access to super. So there's various grounds upon which you can actually already access your super before you reach preservation age. There are financial hardship grounds, there are compassionate grounds, but the right side of that diagram are the health pillars, which are permanent incapacity or terminal illness. Generally speaking, if you're accessing your super, or somebody's accessing their super on the health grounds, it's likely that if they have insurance, they probably also qualify for that disability insurance as well. A lot of people that I've spoken to over the years have accessed their account balances and never were notified, never knew that they also had disability insurance that they could have claimed at the same time. So that's an important thing to bear in mind. In addition to those grounds, on the 20th of April this year, the law was changed, and so people now facing financial stress as a result of COVID-19 can access their superannuation account balance early. I want to stress that accessing your super early should only be done as a last resort, because the consequences of doing so for your retirement account balance, as well as on your insurance and other factors, can be significant. This is also why strict eligibility criteria apply in making these types of applications. And there's potential penalties for anyone who might be seeking to make an application inappropriately. If you are eligible, you need to apply through the MyGov website to access up to $10,000 out of your super balance before the 1st of July 2020, and then to access a further $10,000 after the 1st of July 2020. I'll discuss now who is eligible and some of the things to carefully consider before you withdraw your super balance early. So you can apply to access your super early under the pandemic provisions if you are unemployed or eligible to receive one of the following government allowances. So firstly, the job seeker payment, the youth allowance for job seekers, parenting payment, special benefits, or the farm household allowance. You can also apply for early release under the new provisions if you can show that on or after the 1st of January 2020, you were either made redundant or had your working hours reduced by at least 20%. So if you're a sole trader, you need to show that your business was suspended or there was a reduction in your turnover of 20% or more. So these are strict criteria, and like I said, with potentially severe penalties for those seeking access to their super early who are ineligible. So things to consider before early access. Like I said, it should be a last resort. Think about the consequences on your retirement balance, which will affect you later on in life. And withdrawing your super account balance will jeopardise your insurance cover potentially. And that's insurance that's attached automatically to that super account in most of the time. The other things to be mindful of are potential fraud, and the ATO has basically warned that there is a risk of scams on the early release of super. So that given the volume of requests and that these are also being processed across different groups and agencies, there are concerns that requests for early super might be a weakness scammers will seek to exploit. So identification checks can be hard to check quickly in the current environment, given that we can't really have documents certified as easily or at all in some cases. And that's a new issue that's given rise, or that has arisen rather, given the scale of requests that have been coming in. The other thing is that it's not clear who will pay out in the event of a fraudulent withdrawal, so a member is not left out of pocket. And really, I think we need some further safeguards from the government to ensure that funds are covered for this type of risk, and so that members can be reimbursed if needed. I've included a couple of the issues that the ATO has warned about, including people impersonating the ATO or a trusted organisation like the Super Fund to steal money or personal identifying information, and also warning people that someone might approach a person and charge them for services to access their super. And that's a free, that's something that somebody could do for themselves for free, or somebody could be assisted by a financial counsellor, for example, for free. There's a bit more information on the ATO website, and I've included a link on the slide there. There's other things to also be mindful of. So sadly, there have been reports of real estate agents pressuring tenants in financial hardship to make an early withdrawal of their super to cover their rental payments before they'll be shown any leniency. And ASIC have issued a warning that that type of conduct could lead to jail time and fines, as it could be a breach of the Corporations Act. I think it's also important to remember that in the event of bankruptcy, super is one of the few savings that are quarantined from creditors, given the crucial role of super in retirement. So if a person is in extreme financial distress, we suggest ensuring that you've explored all options before drawing down on super. That's especially if there is a risk of bankruptcy in the future. I think another thing to be mindful of is that vulnerable people might be pressured to withdraw their super, including the elderly, people with mental illness or even physical illnesses, people who are incapacitated to make their own informed decisions, and women or even men in abusive relationships. There are also reports that people who are going through divorce are accessing their super early in an attempt to reduce their ex-spouse's entitlements. And I think it's really important to get proper advice in regards to that. I'm by no means a family lawyer, but I do know that that might still be subject to a settlement and a distribution to your spouse. So it's really important to make informed decisions and make sure that the reasons you're accessing your super are motivated by the right, you know, that you're giving regard to the right considerations before you make these decisions. So, as I warned earlier, one of the biggest concerns for me and for my colleagues who work in this space are that people don't know that they have death and TPD cover that's attached to their super accounts, and some have income protection as well. And if you don't know that you've got this insurance and you withdraw your entire account balance, you could lose that automatic cover. This insurance cover is a critical lifeline for many, and it's often the only insurance people will have, particularly at times like this where people are unable to work due to an injury or illness, and they may need their insurance more than ever. History shows us that disability insurance is actually most utilised during and in the aftermath of an economic crisis. So the loss of this cover when you need it most could be really significant. The other thing to note is that if you withdraw your account balance and you don't leave a minimum amount in the account to cover premiums, that's how the cover is lost. The cover remains in place because you've got enough money in your account to be able to fund those premiums. I want to talk a bit about MySuper legislation. So under MySuper, a super fund trustee is required to provide the following insurance benefits at a minimum to all MySuper members. So as I mentioned earlier, if your employer puts their employee into a default super fund, it must be MySuper compliant, and that means that automatic TPD and death cover must be included. It's currently opt-out, which means you get it automatically unless you opt out, but I should mention that insurance is not automatic for people under 25 years old or where their account balance is under $6,000. So those members must opt in to have this TPD and death cover applied. It's important to note that about 12 million Australians have insurance through super, although about a quarter of members don't know that they have that cover. And it's that quarter of members that we worry about who might be accessing their super early and not know that they're going to lose this insurance that they might need to claim on later down the track. More than 70% of life insurance policies are held through super funds. And so what that means is that each year there are about 17,000 disability benefits paid and about 46,000 death claims paid. Last year, new laws were passed directing super funds to cancel insurance attached to member accounts if they didn't receive contributions to that account for 16 months, or if the balance within the super account dropped below $6,000. The federal government has now confirmed that if you have an active account with more than $6,000 at any time before the 1st of November last year, your insurance will not be switched off. So if your account balance drops below $6,000 due to accessing super under the new pandemic provisions, your insurance won't automatically be cancelled. So that's good. But again, it's really important to note that if there's not enough money in your account to pay the premiums when you withdraw, then your insurance cover will stop. So if a person is insisting that they want to access their super, they should call their fund and find out what the minimum amount is required by that fund to cover the premiums in order for insurance to continue. So what's the big deal about insurance within super? Why claim it? So like I said earlier, if you're unable to work for any medical reason, you might be eligible to claim insurance through your super. And Maurice Blackburn will check your super entitlements for free. So you might be able to claim for income protection, for total and permanent disability benefits, and or terminal illness benefits. I'll just step through briefly what these benefits actually mean, what they provide for people, and give you some examples of what they actually look like in practice. So total and permanent disability or TPD benefits are lump sum benefits that can be claimed if you are unable to perform work that you're reasonably trained to do or qualified for by reason of your education, training and experience. Most definitions require you to show that you're unlikely ever to return to work, but not all work under the sun, just the work that you've got the skills, education and training to do. So the consideration is limited to that person's skill set. You wouldn't expect a person with limited English skills and no experience working in an office who's only worked in a factory to be deployed after an injury to go back to that type of work. So it is important to note that. People think that TPD is an insurmountable definition, but in fact, when we break it down, it isn't, and that's why we are able to achieve success with a lot of our clients. There's also total and temporary disability benefits. These are usually called income protection or salary continuance, and depending on the insurance policy at hand, monthly benefit could be payable for 2, 5 years or until the age of 60 or 65. A common question we get asked is, can you make multiple claims? Generally, yes, for TPD, you can make multiple TPD claims at once. It's very rare that an insurance policy will exclude you from or limit you from making more than one claim. We see it happen rarely, but most of the time you can make multiple claims, and a lot of our clients have succeeded in having multiple lump sums paid. Income protection, however, no. If you're insured with 2 or 3 insurers for income protection, they will offset against one another. So you can't have more than one income stream at one time. That would be regarded as double or triple dipping, and that's not something that you can receive at one time. So total and permanent disability insurance, like I said, provides a lump sum, and the definitions vary from insurance policy to the next, so from one policy to the next. I did mention earlier, though, that the definitions are generally modelled on the definition to access your account balance on the grounds of permanent incapacity. So if a person is already thinking of accessing their account balance on the grounds that they are just permanently incapacitated for work, it's highly likely that they'll also satisfy the TPD definition as well. I'll give you an example of a classic TPD definition, one that we see most commonly. And it's that you'll be considered totally and permanently disabled if you're unable to follow your usual occupation by reason of illness or injury for the duration of the waiting period. So the waiting period is often 3 or 6 months. And in the opinion of the insurer, at the end of that waiting period, you're considered unlikely to ever be able to engage in any work for which you're reasonably suited, taking into account your education, training, and experience. This is the most common definition that we see. The operative words that I like to emphasise are unlikely. So you're not expected to prove that you are unable to work. It's just on the balance of probabilities, having regard to a person's age, the physical or mental health issues and the barriers that creates for that person. How likely is it that they'll ever be able to engage in any work that they're reasonably suited to? And the consideration is limited to what they have education, training, and experience to perform. As I said, there's a really important part of this is the medical evidence, and that's what we do. We garner the medical evidence in support of a claim and a person's employment and education history. Some insurers have complicated things by adding in retraining clauses, requiring people to show that even after retraining, they wouldn't be able to re-enter the workforce. That can complicate the claims a little bit. Some insurers have made definitions a little bit tougher and have imposed the unable ever definition. So the key message here is that it's not easy for the average person to know what definition will apply to them. In fact, it'll be hard for them to even get a copy of the insurance policy. They might be able to access the PDS on the website of the fund, but it's unlikely they'll know what tests they have to satisfy in order to have a TPD claim paid. But we're pretty well equipped and we know these insurance policies quite well, so we can set the claims up from the minute that the client walks in the door. Income protection, again, depending on the insurance policy at hand, the payment period might be 2, 5 or 5 years, or it could go to age 60, 65 or even 67. It doesn't pay generally your full wage. Most of the time people will only be paid 75% of their average earnings, and they calculate that based on the previous 12 months, the pre-disability earnings in the 12 months before the person last worked. There are waiting periods. Again, they vary depending on the policy at hand, And it's important to note that if a person's receiving income protection, they can't also receive Centrelink or work cover compensation or other benefits at the same time, other income benefits at the same time. They will offset against one another. So those are things to be mindful of whenever making those sorts of claims, and those are in the forefront of our minds when we're pursuing these types of entitlements. This is a standard income protection definition, and a person will be considered totally disabled if by reason of illness or injury they are unable to perform at least one income producing duty of their occupation. So it's a matter of identifying what are the income producing duties of that person's occupation. They have to show that they're not actually working in any occupation, whether or not for reward. So that would mean that they can't also be doing any voluntary work. And they are under the regular care and following the advice of a medical practitioner. I think that our clients' stories are actually the best way to illustrate the impact of the right support and advice at the right time. So I'll step you through a couple of real examples that demonstrate how we've been able to achieve successful outcomes for our clients for TPD and for income protection benefits. And of course, we've changed the names for privacy reasons. So Anna is a client that we represented who was unaware of her entitlements. She was a working professional. She worked in the banking and finance sector for a large financial institution. She turned to alcohol as a way of coping with the stress of her role, and she eventually lost her job in 2005. And that was because her addiction became very noticeable, particularly when she was found to store alcohol in her desk drawer. She started seeking financial help through Odyssey House. They referred her to Maurice Blackburn, and we looked into a TPD claim with Plum Super. We discovered that her employer had paid into this fund on her behalf. We wrote to Plum Super. We discovered she had $300,000 worth of cover. We put together the medical evidence and we put it to the fund, and they approved her claim. So she got $300,000 paid to her, and that allowed her to access much needed rehab and treatment and turn her life around for the better. Henry was aware of his entitlements. He knew that he had insurance, but he really got overwhelmed in the process and got completely stuck in the insurer's web when they were assessing his claim. And that's how he came to us. So Henry had a senior role in a large company and was earning a decent salary. He began using drugs to cope with work stress, and this fractured his marriage and he lost custody of his children. He lost his job and became homeless for periods of time. Henry had an income protection policy, and that covered him for 85% of his pre-disability earnings for 5 years. He made a claim on the policy, but the insurer rejected it because he hadn't consulted a doctor for his medical condition until after he stopped work. The reason he didn't see a doctor was not because he wasn't unwell. It was because, like most people with a mental health issue, he lacked insight into his mental illness. And he was also embarrassed and lost control of his situation. He came to us, we took the file over, we wrote to the insurer, and we managed to overturn the rejection of the claim. The insurer agreed to pay his full 5-year benefit backdated to when he'd stopped work. And then a financial counsellor helped him find accommodation, and suddenly Henry had the necessary funds to access other services, such as drug and alcohol rehabilitation, to get him back on track. I think our clients' stories illustrate that mental illness affects people from all corners of the community. I think that message isn't lost on anyone that's dialing in today. And that's an obvious reality that existed pre-COVID-19 and has been exacerbated throughout this very unusual time. What I would reflect on is that if these clients had withdrawn their entire account balances before becoming disabled, they would have lost their insurance entitlements. And by the time they became disabled, they would have had nothing to claim on. As I said earlier, financial crisis and loss of employment can impact the mental well-being of people, especially during a pandemic. And I think that there needs to be greater awareness of insurance entitlements a person can claim for. Again, the need to get financial advice and make an informed decision before accessing your super early is something that I would definitely stress. And Maurice Blackburn do a free super check and offer obligation-free first appointments for preliminary advice. Before we jump to the Q&A, I do want to go through a couple of takeaway points. Firstly, it's if you're considering withdrawing funds from your super account, seek financial advice about the impacts. If you don't have a financial advisor, we can refer you to a reputable licensed one, or you can call the National Debt Helpline for free financial counselling. I've included the number there, 1800 007 007, and I'm sure Nithya will circulate the slides too. Before taking out super, find out what insurance cover you have and decide if you want to retain that insurance. If you do want to retain it, you need to call the fund and find out how much money you need to leave in your account in order to have premiums continue to be funded from that account. If you have a medical condition that may cause you to stop work in the future, it's important not to lose your insurance entitlements. And as I've said, if you're unable to work as a result of a mental health or other medical condition, you may be able to claim your insurance now. Again, we do a free, no obligation super check over the phone and can investigate what level of cover you've got with each of the funds that your employers might have contributed to over the years.